And I'm delighted to be joined by two folk who very much champion free speech: the British charity worker and political commentator Nick Buckley, MBE, and the personal finance expert, speaker, and author of 38 books, Jasmine Birtles, who is the founder of Money Magpie. Great to have you both here. Welcome to Outspoken. And Nick Buckley, wow. If it wasn't for Elon Musk's X, we would have had no idea that a Labour Party councillor was actually suggesting that we should cut the throats of people who he disagrees with. We'd have no idea about that because all the mainstream media, Woke ITV, the British Bashing Corporation, the Daily Mail, the Express, they all said that these protests were full of peace and harmony last night.
And that's why governments always need to keep control of the media. Otherwise, messages, news, and stories will be released that are not approved. And we cannot have non-approved stories going out in the UK. Otherwise, the authoritarian grip on the people will weaken. And that's exactly what I call it Twitter. I won't call it X. That's exactly what Twitter has done. By Elon buying it a few years ago. He's been able to show the people exactly what's happening in the country.
Jasmine, the thing is, right, I don't actually want any of these folk arrested, actually. I think free speech in the UK is in peril. But the problem is, as soon as Kier started talking about this new authoritarian approach where everyone had to be punished, well, then the left, the hard left, has to be punished too.
Yes, agreed. It's a question of equality and fairness. And, even the smallest child can see when something is unfair. And, I agreed. I think most of us, those of us who believe in free speech, and like you, I also believe in free speech, we're not, frankly, that bothered about some, nasty tweet. I mean, everybody, it's like tweeting badly is like sort of being rude about your friends behind their back, except that they can hear it, with Twitter. And that's part of life. It's not pleasant, but, it's part of life. But as you say, when people are arrested, and chillingly, as we're hearing, we could be arrested simply for reporting on a riot, maybe filming it with a phone, putting it on Twitter, on Facebook, or on Instagram, one of those. We could actually be arrested purely for that. Well, that's Orwellian at the very best, So we do need to fight for the right to have free speech, whether you're left or whether you're right. There is an element, certainly, if somebody says, I hate this person, this is their name, this is their picture, this is where they live, let's all go around with machetes and kill them. That's a whole different thing. That's genuinely dangerous. But just saying we hate these people, I just don't like the way they look. Well, that's human nature, sadly. So I agree. We need to have equality, and we need to have reasonableness, reasonable fairness, and understanding the way human beings speak and act and really do think.
And Nick Buckley, also to protect us from genuine crime, from genuine terror, from genuine violence, which, let's be honest, is very often not from a keyboard warrior. I mean, I receive hundreds of death threats a month. Actually, if the police were to investigate all of them, they'd have no time to actually focus on murderers and rapists and terrorists and actually all of the criminals who desperately need to be locked up. So I'm very concerned about this mission creep under an authoritarian Labour government who have used these riots almost immediately to crack down on free speech. And the thing is, Nick, it's all diversion anyway, because I swear that the riots were not to do with disinformation. By the time any riots started, everyone knew that the 17-year-old who has now been charged for murdering those three beautiful young girls in Southport was a 17-year-old son of Rwandan immigrants. That was known by that point, Nick. But the issue is that we're being gaslit into believing that it was the misinformation that caused the riots. Actually, we're angry, Nick. We're angry about the fact that we have been lied to about mass immigration for 2 decades now.
Exactly. I'd say it's longer than 2 decades. Labour are taking the brunt of this at the moment because they've in power. They've been in power 4 weeks, 5 weeks. What a time to gain power. But this has been building up for decades and decades and decades. We keep telling our politicians we want change. We want less immigration. We want less immigration. And they keep promising less immigration. So we vote for them. They get into power and they increase immigration. Then the next party comes along and they say, we'll reduce immigration to the tens of thousands. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And they all keep lying to us. And the pressure is increasing. And it was only going to take a spark. It was going to take the final straw to break the camel's back. And that lunatic in Southampton was the straw that broke the camel's back. He could have been anybody. And the people have now said, we've had enough. And I think on top of that, the freedom that Twitter and X gives us has also contributed to this, because we saw what was going on. We've seen what's going on. We see the names of the people who are raping people, killing people. We get told they're illegal immigrants. We've got the guy in London pushing someone almost under the YouTube, a train on the underground, and been in the country months. We're seeing it all the time. And the excuse that you're wrong doesn't work anymore now, because we're seeing it all the time.
Exactly, and they can try and bury it as much as they want. But as you say, we see the crimes. We know who a vast majority of the crimes are being committed by. Jasmine, can we just talk a little bit about what was actually going on yesterday, though, and whether it was a false flag that there were going to be these 100 so-called far-right protests? Because none of them emerged, Jasmine, none of them emerged whatsoever. And you've now got Nick Lowles, who runs this charity Hope Not Hate. By the way, I think it's absolutely ludicrous that they can be clarified as a charity, given that they are an organisation which I believe spreads hate against folk like me. But that's slightly beside the point in this case, because he has admitted, he's actually come out on X and admitted this was a hoax. But great news, because the hoax resulted in all of this really positive media coverage. So the MSM was played here, weren't they?
Well, they were played. They may have been complicit. Who knows? Because they, if I'd been, in mainstream and been looking at it, I'd want to know, how do we know that these are going to happen? Because 100 riots, that's a lot to organise. So you would expect to see websites, you'd expect to see chat rooms, you expect all sorts. And if there wasn't anything like that, and it sounds like there wasn't, there was just this, as you say, this one message saying, oh, there's going to be a riot, it's going to be a bit of a rock on Wednesday night, and the whole of the media went, oh right, absolutely, this is clearly gospel news, we'll all go there. I'm surprised because they didn't do any of their own due diligence, and as you say, it got lots of headlines on all the front pages, including, as you say, surprisingly, the Daily Mail and the Daily Express and whatever, who wanted to be part of it. And it did remind me, as I think it was Martin Daubney said, of the COVID times, yes, when whole of the mainstream media was paid to push the same narrative. So that's kind of honestly the way it feels, that they're being paid either by government, or it could be by other corporate organizations or individuals, very, very, very rich individuals. Because to be honest now, as you know, with newspapers being on their knees, really, it doesn't take a lot of money to get them to do your will. You can pay them in a few thousand to put something big on the front cover, and for some people that's pocket change.
And the thing is, Nick Buckley, even if they're not being directly paid, actually what it is the tyranny of woke advertising agencies. So newspapers like the Daily Mail, like the Express, like the Sun, are so terrified of being branded right-wing, then experiencing the sorts of ad boycotts that X, the social media platform, is currently experiencing, and Elon Musk has threatened these, or he's going to file them now, these antitrust lawsuits, or closer to home, my former employer GB News. They're so terrified of these ad boycotts. What that means is they are desperate to be seen to be responsible, which is why we received all of this coverage, which meant actually they couldn't do their job and tell the truth, that actually there was a lot of hate and a lot of violence being spread on these far left protests, which, by the way, they don't even describe as far left, do they? They love describing everything as far right, but these were just peace protests.
These were anti-racist protests. So we have the far right, who are the evil Nazis, and then we have the good guys called the anti-racist protesters. Even the narrative around how we name them is so biased by itself. Now, when we look at things like this, we need to always think, who benefits from this? Who benefited from this hoax last night? And that, in most cases, will point to the people who probably perpetrated the hoax in the first place. The people that benefited were the anti-racist protesters. They managed to go to the places they wanted to for police protection, to be able to scream and shout, and then claim we drove away all the Nazis. Those Nazis were too afraid to come on our street because we were here. And then I just want to jump back to the Labour politician, the councillor who's just been arrested. Two things that this only just happened, so many people haven't noticed yet. The woman stood behind him has got a jacket from Amnesty on. Yes. She looks like she's an employee from Amnesty, and she's clapping the death threats.
Yeah.
And then the councillor at the end, after he's done all the Free Palestine stuff, he then goes, "God bless everybody."
Yeah.
God bless everybody. You've just incited the crowd to murder people. God bless everybody.
To cut their throats. Cut their throats. And Jasmine, isn't that an incredible point from Nick? Because I was thinking that earlier. This is actually the truth now about a lot of these middle-class leftists who support Amnesty International and organizations like that. Actually, their rhetoric is far, far more extreme than anything we see on the right.
Well, it's an interesting thing to see that it really isn't a question of left or right. Those who consider themselves on the left and those who consider themselves on the right often, impute all kinds of evil to the other side. But it really doesn't matter which alleged side you're on. If you're full of hatred, and I agree, the idea of hope not hate immediately tells me that they're full of hatred. But anybody who is full of hatred will come out with this kind of stuff, and it doesn't matter if you think you support Gaza or you think you support Israel, if you think you support leftist ideology or think you support rightist ideology. On both sides, you've got decent, normal people who understand how to behave and how to think about their fellow man. But you also have these ones who have absolute violent hatred in their hearts. I think the only difference here is that, according to the media, according to the establishment, it's the people on the right only who have these hateful thoughts. But what we're seeing from, as you say, thanks to X, thanks to various platforms, that people on the left have just as much hatred in their hearts, and quite often it spills over into quite serious, nasty violence, even if that's just verbal violence.
Well, of course, before these riots sparked by the Southport incident, if you actually look at all the street protests, Nick Buckley, it has been driven by the left. So Black Lives Matter, Just Stop Oil, Insulate Britain, Extinction Rebellion, the pro-Hamas protesters, all left-wing, effectively. So there is two-tier, not just with policing, but also the way that these incidents are covered.
Of course, and it's so obvious now. Let's start with Black Lives Matter. Police officers taking the knee. Kier Starmer taking the knee.
Yes.
Sending this signal that we support them all. Extinction Rebellion, I believe it was. Police officers skateboarding with protesters having a jolly time. Senior police officers walking up to people blocking the streets, saying to them, "Are you comfortable? Do you want us to go get you all a cup of tea?" And it's like, Where does this stop? Then looking at
They were
the
dancing.
Palestine.
They were dancing with the Extinction Rebellion protests. Remember that?
Absolutely. And then getting them to court and judges saying, well, we understand what you're doing. You're trying to save the world. You're really superheroes. So don't do it again and get out my courts.
Yeah.
And then look at the Free Palestine. You know, a foreign problem on a foreign country on a foreign continent concerning foreign people is brought to this country. Part of it is anti-Semitic, not all of it. Part of it is anti-Semitic. Part of the reason why we have Queers for Palestine and Socialist Worker marching alongside them is because they've all got the same aim, which is to pull down the West so we can build a utopia.
Yeah.
And these people are allowed to get away with that.
I know.
But God
Queers
forbid,
for Palestine, though. I every time I hear Queers for Palestine, I just think chickens for KFC. These people are insane.
They're not, I don't think they haven't said they know what they're doing, and what they're doing is saying to themselves, my enemy's enemy is my friend. So if Hamas and Islamists can pull down the West, that means us socialists can build the communist utopia. I know why they're doing it, but going back to the police, but if you have demonstrations with white working class people, scum, Nazis, no excuses, get the police riot gear straight away, never give them the benefit of the doubt, get in there, crack heads straight away, because they're always a problem. And
Yes.
that's the two-tier policing.
And the mainstream media has worked so hard over the past week to sometimes actually commit almost mental arithmetic in order to justify violence by Muslim groups, because they always want to say that there is a reason why this violence is acceptable, and also make the point that actually it is only people of colour who feel scared on the streets at the moment, which, let's just be honest, is not a reality. And it's very difficult to talk about this, and certainly no one in the mainstream media will. But a lot of crime committed against white folk in the UK is committed by people of colour. And there's a lot of reasons why white people should feel scared on the streets. But if you also look at some of the scenes over even just the past 24 hours, you'll realise that very often our country no longer looks like the England that we fell in love with. So I've got a couple to show you. This was Newcastle.
Stop holding, man. It's not you.
And then Sheffield. So these are just not the sorts of scenes that make folk feel safe, are they, Jasmine? And that's why lots of Jewish people I speak to feel completely terrified to walk the streets at the moment. And you would if you were walking into that mob of pro-Hamas supporters, wouldn't you?
Absolutely, yes. And it is something that does seem to be going forward and is not being checked or really properly questioned by the media, that many Jewish people do feel nervous about being in this country, about going on the streets. And so do just ordinary white people. I have a friend in Essex, for example, who emailed me a couple of days ago saying he was thinking of going with his family. He's got 2 small children, to live in Costa Rica. Because he doesn't feel that Britain is a place that he wants to bring them up in anymore. And he was asking me, about tax and earning money and things there, because he can work online. So if that's just one person, but I suspect that there are quite a lot of people around the country, not just white people, but black people as well. I mean, I have friends who are immigrants. They paid to be here. They went through all sorts of hoops to be here. And they're very unhappy about what's happening to this country. Like you, Dan. I mean, you would be a good example. You're an immigrant, let's be honest. And you paid, you did all the right things to get
see, I always actually correct people on this, Jasmine, because I was born a British citizen, you see, because both of my parents were born in the UK, and so were my grandparents. This has become a heated issue, actually, Jasmine, over the past couple of weeks, because Albiam Ancona, who is a friend of mine, recently sacked from GB News, was trying to say, Dan, well, you're an immigrant too. And my point was, well, would you describe Boris Johnson as an immigrant because he happened to be born overseas? No, you wouldn't. And I've been a British citizen, obviously, right from day dot. But the other thing is that what happens with these stories is actually the true Islamist threat is covered up for almost any reason. And yet, I know it's not in the UK, but this absolutely chilling story over the past 24 hours that Taylor Swift, the international superstar who attracts lots of young girls to her concerts in stadiums, has had to cancel 3 massive gigs in Vienna this week because of a serious ISIS plot to blow up the stadium. And as Martin Daubney tweeted there, the real terrorists barely make the headlines. 3 Taylor Swift concerts cancelled in Vienna due to Islamic State terror threats remind me how many children are blown up at gigs by the far right, how many teachers forced into hiding, how many soldiers killed. And look, I know it's in Vienna, but it happened here, Nick. It happened at the Ariana Grande concert. Come on, where is the real terror threat? Where should the focus be? We know it's on Islamist extremism. And to say that in this climate will see you be branded as far right.
Of course, the Manchester Arena bombing was on my street. I heard the bomb go off, and you hear lots of noises in the city centre. And I rolled over in bed and went back to sleep. It was only next morning I realised what had gone on, but I heard the explosion in my flat in the city centre on my street. Yes, Islam is a threat. You know, our terrorist threat level at the moment is there because of Islam and Islam terrorists. But that doesn't mean it's just Muslim people who are violent and committing crime and killing other people. All groups, all nations, all people have violent people within the groups. And I heard from a colleague's friends yesterday who are Muslim women working in Manchester city centre, and they were scared to go home because they had hijabs on, and they were scared to go home. What, they're going to identify me as a Muslim. So the fear is throughout the whole country. And the reason why we have fear is because that's how politicians get to control us. We've been saying to the Muslim community for decades, you're under threat, Islamophobia is rampant, and you need protecting. If you vote for me, I'll protect you. And we've been doing it with every other identity groups, the gay groups, the Bangladeshi groups, the black groups, and we've been splitting each other up into tribes. And we're getting to the stage now where this is tribal warfare.
Yes.
It doesn't have to make sense anymore now, because when you're scared, you will go with your tribe.
And one of Labour's biggest threats, by the way, now, is the fact that they're actually losing the Muslim vote. We saw, didn't we, Jess Phillips, who has been so desperate to try and justify Muslim violence in her constituency this week, and it's because she was very nearly beaten by George Galloway's Workers' Party. So the Labour Party know actually there's a big electoral threat for them on the left, because we're going to start seeing more sectarian groups on the Muslim side entering politics. We saw 5 of them in Westminster after this election. But look, I want to move on now to talk about Nigel Farage versus James O'Brien. This is an ongoing feud which has really erupted this week. And even though Nigel has made it very, very clear that he's furious with O'Brien's characterization that he is in some way, either in part or in totality, responsible for sparking the Southport riots, a claim which is not backed up, by the way, in any form, with any form of evidence. Well, James O'Brien has gone on LBC and, surprise, surprise, doubled down. Watch this.
Racist liars responsible There'll be attempts by the racist liars responsible for the riots that we're seeing at the moment, the Farage riots, as you might like to call them.
At no point in the last week or in the previous 30 years have I ever encouraged the use of violence. Have I ever encouraged the use of anti-democratic means? We have LBC presenters like James O'Brien calling them the Farage riots. I have had nothing to do with any form of street violence now or at any point in my
Did
career.
I call them the Farage riots? I'm so sorry. I should have said Farage. The Farage riots. I apologise to everybody concerned for that little slip of the tongue.
Isn't he a sanctimonious little piece of work? And I would absolutely love to see Nigel Farage take action, but quite rightly, he's made the point that actually getting involved in that sort of litigation, it takes all of your soul. And believe me, from personal experience, I know that. Here he was on Talk TV this morning.
Incitement.
Yes.
And as a list, still hasn't been answered. And because I asked a simple question, that suddenly becomes incitement.
Yes.
And as a result of this, and as a result of what has been said by some highly irresponsible broadcasters, over the course of the weekend, my security situation has radically changed.
Yes. And isn't it libelous, apart from anything else, some of this stuff?
Well, I've been looking at this. Libel, yeah, you have to prove actual harm, actual reputational harm.
Right.
I've fought libel before, actions. I've even fought one against the Times newspaper. I don't know whether you've ever fought one, Mike, but if you do...
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, if you do, it sucks up all of your emotional energy. It can take months out of your life.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee you're going to win. So I've tended to be more the Duke of Wellington,
Yeah.
publish and be damned, ignore it and move on. But this is, very nasty indeed.
Yeah, because we've got this terribly polarised world now, haven't we? We've got two-tier society minimum, we've got two-tier policing, we've got two-tier politics, we've got two-tier pretty much everything, two-tier justice. I mean, I'm going to play you from last night, the Walthamstow rally, because, of course, it's all kumbaya this morning. Everybody's going, oh, isn't it lovely? You know, hate has been beaten.
And we know that hate wasn't beaten. But look, he's made a good point there, I think, Jasmine, hasn't he? But the problem is that it means that James O'Brien continues to get away with spreading egregious lies on air with no consequences because he's left alone by the off-communists, because you know that, again, there's two-tier policing of our mainstream media as well.
Totally, absolutely. And again, I'm reminded of COVID because James O'Brien was screaming during the COVID times that everybody's got to get vaccinated. You know, if you're not vaccinated, you're an anti-vaxxer, you're mad, you're a murderer. And now again, he is so establishment. He's so absolutely whatever happens to be being pushed at the moment, which I'm sure he would hate to hear, because I'm reminded of what John Lydon said recently, that he couldn't believe, he would have been amazed back in the day to think that in these times it's the right wingers who are sticking a finger at the establishment, but the left wingers are completely solidly establishment types of people, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. They're just doing what they're told. We have now the authoritarian establishment left in government, in media, in education, etc. And as you say, we very much have two-tier policing of the media by Ofcom, which was set up by Tony Blair and is run by his cronies, as far as I can see. So everybody's having a go at GB News, for example, as you say. I mean, they were having a go at it before it even started, trying to abort it before it was birthed, and still continuing, while broadcasters like the BBC, like Sky News, like Channel 4 can get away with absolutely extraordinary amounts of lying and dissimulation.
Yeah, totally agree. Absolutely agree with that. Nick Buckley, where do you stand on this one, James O'Brien versus Nigel Farage?
I think it was predictable. I think we're living in the beginning of an authoritarian state. And
I think we're there, Nick. I actually think we're there.
Possibly, but we're at the beginning of it anyway. You have to be on the side of the state if you want a comfortable life, if you want that promotion, if you want to do well in life. You've got to be part of it, just like we saw in Eastern Europe and Soviet Union. I think the only blessing for me is a quote from Star Wars from 1977, where Princess Leia says to Darth Vader, the more you tighten your grip, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. And that's what we need to do now. They're tightening their grip, and we've got to fight back. We've got to be the rebellion.
But that's why I feel so depressed too. That really the only person who's pointing out the woke Stasi is Elon Musk. Now, thank God we've got him on our side. The richest man in the world, so he doesn't give a damn about two-tier Kier and his free speech threats. But I actually do think we're there, Jasmine. I really do. I know it's only been 4 weeks of this government, but when you really think about what's going on here, it's terrifying. We have the Director of Public Prosecutions warning that just retweeting footage from a riot could see you arrested and then fast-tracked and charged through the system. Well, why? Why?
Yeah.
We have police warning us not to say anything about the events that we see around us. This is absolutely terrifying. I cannot believe that within just 4 weeks there has been an absolute crackdown on free speech, and the mainstream media are just going along with it because they hate the social media companies, because the social media companies are taking away their business. But there's a more important principle at play.
Yes, and I mean, certainly, as you say, we've only had Labour in for 4 weeks, and the rot set in much earlier, of course, under Conservatives. But I am very concerned about Keir Starmer, who, as we know, is a member of the Trilateral Commission, which is kind of World Economic Forum light. He loves the World Economic Forum. As we know, he said on air that he would rather be with Davos than in Westminster. He does seem to be a bully. He's certainly somebody without any charm or nuance. And, you know, as one of your clips showed, he has no intention of dealing with the genuine underlying problems that are hitting all types of communities in this country.
Doesn't even want to talk about it.
No,
doesn't even want to have a discussion about immigration. I find him truly terrifying, actually, because Nick Buckley, come on, there is two-tier policing going on. Why is it, given that we have an absolute hard and fast principle, or what I thought was a hard and fast principle of our Westminster system, a separation of the judiciary, the executive, and the parliament, why is it that Keir Starmer can dictate to the judiciary that actually, if you are a rioter in Southport, you're going to be locked up within 4 days. But if you're a rioter in Hare Hills, who happens to be from a different community, or if you beat up the police at Manchester Airport, your justice is not swift. I mean, I have real issues with that.
Again, this hasn't happened in the last 4 or 5 weeks. This has been going on for decades. We're just beginning to see it now because of Twitter, because things, the lid is off the jar now. So we're seeing everything. Some people for the first time, and they're going, wow, this is all new. I've been talking about this for 2 decades. I used to be based in police stations 20 years ago. I saw two-tier policing 20 years ago, not at the level we see now, but it was there then. I think Keir Starmer, and this will be hard to believe, Keir Starmer is terrified. He's scared. Just before the authoritarian state collapses, it gets worse as they try to cling to power. He knows he's hanging on by his fingernails. The elite know all this could come tumbling down very quickly. So they're going into overdrive with more force, more force. They're terrified of us. They're terrified of the British people. We need to remember that. These aren't gods. These are weak people who've been elected. They're easy to overturn.
And of course, there's lots of pressure on the Conservative Party too, who I totally agree deserve lots of the blame for the situation that we've ended up in. But Robert Jenrick, who is the favourite to take on Kemi Badenoch in this race, is, I think, actually saying some good things. But as soon as he speaks about two-tier policing, look at what happens. Sly News comes down on him as if he's committed some sort of offence.
Yourself have tweeted about two-tier policing. As far as I could see, most recently on the 10th of March, does that phrase, two-tier policing, have any application in the last 8 or 9 days?
Well, I have been very critical of the police in the past, particularly around the attitude of some police forces to the protests that we saw since October the 7th. You know, I thought it was quite wrong that somebody could shout
What about the
Allah
last 8 or
Akbar
9 days?
on the streets of London and not be immediately arrested, or project genocidal chants onto Big Ben and that person not be immediately arrested? That attitude is wrong, and I'll always call out the police for it. I think at the moment, the police are doing their very best. You know, we should thank our brave police officers. We should support their efforts. They need now to be arresting the rioters. I want those individuals who've committed these serious crimes to be sent to jail for the longest possible term. I don't think at this moment politicians should be doing anything to make the lives and jobs of our police officers any more difficult than they already are. But there will come a time, once this violence has been quelled, where we can look back and see how well have these matters been handled, have each type of violence, wherever it's come from, been handled with equality, and that is very important.
Yourself.
And Jasmine, of course, he has been completely slammed for that.
Yes. Oh, it's extraordinary because he's just, to my mind, saying what is reasonable, frankly, that we need equality. We need single-tier policing, that, as he says, if somebody is projecting really quite offensive words on Big Ben, then that should be taken into account. I mean, certainly if you're going to be jailing people for some nasty tweet, you're going to have to jail them for putting something unpleasant on Big Ben. So all he's calling for, it seems to me, is equal treatment.
Totally. But the thing is, Nick, this opens up such a can of worms. It's a slippery slope. And I want to give you one more example, Nick, which you can respond to, because we had Lauren Jones today. Now, she is a Labour MP, newly elected for Rochester and Stroud, and someone's been doing offence archaeology on this woman. She released a statement saying that she's been made aware of a small number of tweets she posted on Twitter from over a decade ago, which she now deeply regrets. I've seen firsthand the importance of bringing communities together and working with tolerance and respect. Now, the tweets in question, let me show you. There was one where she said, "I want these effing Estonian retards out of my flat now." Another, she said, "Annoyed, card shop was shut and then drunk homeless man deliberately barged into me. Big mistake, gave him massive elbow to the ribs." And then she said, "Baronos Wenthrop texts me from Walthamstow to see he's seen a halal Pakistani Chinese grill place. Hope he's not suggesting we go there." And look, I hate offence archaeology, Nick. I'm actually very opposed to this. She sent these tweets 10 years ago. She was probably in a very different place in her life. I understand all of that, but it's her party who are trying to criminalise this sort of speech, Nick. So surely she has to see the irony. And all Labour MPs should wake up to what they are doing. It's dystopian.
It's worse than that. She probably still believes everything she tweeted 10 years ago. But what's changed now is now she has a job on £92,000 a year. And I will do anything to keep this £92,000 a year job. So if I've got to criticise my tweets from 10 years ago, I'll do it. What else do you want me to do? Do you want me to kneel down? I'll do that. Do you want me to wear the veil? I'll do that. Let me keep my £92,000 a year and let me keep this wonderful job where everyone thinks I'm amazing. Tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. But look, I just think we really need to be thinking about what sort of society we are if we're going to start throwing people in prison for inappropriate tweets. It's ludicrous stuff. But wow, what a brilliant superstar panel. Thank you so much to Nick Buckley and Jasmine Bertels, both making their outspoken debut. I'd love to have you back soon.
Did you enjoy that video? I think you did. Come on now, hit that bell, subscribe, comment. Let's build this channel. I need more followers. I need more subscribers. Be part of the journey. See you soon.